Yes, sir. Welcome back, college football and Texas Longhorn fans of all ages. It's finally here. College football is officially back. The first Thursday night game night of the season. Welcome back to episode 15, live edition of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports, otherwise known as Dit Hole, as some fans would like to call it. I'm your host, yours truly, Michael Ween. Today, we're going to be breaking down the marquee games from week one and debuting a new segment, Buy or Sell, during the second half of the show to preview the biggest storylines for this upcoming season as the season got started officially tonight and we have a big slate of games this weekend. Make sure you like and subscribe. And if you are tuning in live, leave your questions and your comments in the chat, and we will get to those at some point. But before we do any of that, everybody, I would like to introduce my first in-season co-host here on the Dit Hole podcast for 2023. It's my pleasure to introduce and welcome fellow Longhorn fan and the fantastic host of the Raw Prospect podcast, Emmy Nixon. How are you on this
I'm good, man. I'm
football?
excited for this. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the intro. And man, this Texas Longhorn season, there's a lot to look forward to. There's definitely
Absolutely.
a lot
Absolutely.
of hope in Longhorn country right now.
Did you get to watch any of the games that were on tonight?
I watched a bit of Utah and Florida, but
Yeah.
it looks to be headed towards a blowout, maybe. But you never
Yeah.
really know what could
A
happen.
lot of people started leaning Florida when they learned that the tight end was going to be out and Cam Rising was going to be out. But give credit, Utah, and of course, Kyle Whittingham had that team ready to play. But let's get into our content today. We have a ton to get to. We got 3 games to break down, including the first one, Texas Rice. And then at the end, we have a huge buy or sell segment, which should be pretty fun. So if you're tuning in, leave us your comments, leave us your opinions, leave us your questions. We've had a couple live viewers each of the past couple episodes since we've been on the Tuesday, Thursday, Monday, Thursday schedule. So hopefully we get some, but if we don't, that's okay. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Let's get into our first game. We're going to do game breakdowns, and then we're going to get into buy or sell. We, of course, since this is a Texas show, have to get into Texas opener, 2:30 on Fox on Saturday. Number 11 Texas, ranked by the AP poll preseason, and their tune-up for Tuscaloosa next weekend will play the Rice Owls, coming off a 5-7 season and an appearance in the Lending Tree Bowl last year. So, Emmy, I'll leave the floor to you. What are you watching for from a Rice perspective in this game? And then what do you want to see from a Texas perspective in response?
Well, if y'all didn't know already, both my parents went to Rice, so I have connection with that school, and their transferred in quarterback JT Daniels is the one you have to watch for if you're the Rice Owls. Bringing him in is a huge deal for this team. This is a team that's has veteran leaders all across the field. They lean on their linebacker core with multifaceted fronts. They switch it up, play over play. Um, and if JT Daniels can come in and get this offense going, this game could be closer than people may think.
It's interesting. The Athletic had a great article today on JT Daniels, written by Sam Kahn, who covers Texas college football for The Athletic. Great writer. I recommend you follow him on Twitter. And if you're subscribed to The Athletic, read his content. It's fantastic. Ask their head coach, Mike Bloomgren, who was the former offensive coordinator at Stanford when Andrew Luck was the quarterback there. So, he's had experience in pro-style offenses, working with quarterbacks that, similar style to JT Daniels. Ask him about his quarterback position going into this season, and he absolutely lights up with joy. The interesting thing about JT Daniels is he's made 29 starts. He's been at 3 schools. He's transferred 3 times now. Started his career at USC, then transferred to Georgia, lost his job there, then transferred to West Virginia, and he's now at Rice. 29 starts, solid stats though, 45 touchdowns to I think 20-something interceptions. Has had some success in his career just trying to find that consistency. The Rice program is thrilled to finally have a guy with a lot of experience who they think can be their starting quarterback, can be their guy, and elevate them to that next level in a conference that has a lot of good group of 5 teams. Tulane being one of them. They're one of the top group of 5 teams coming into this season projectedly. So yeah, I mean, he's one to watch out for. And then you absolutely have to watch out for this wide receiving core for Rice. I do think the Texas secondary will be tested a little bit. This isn't a game like last year against Louisiana Monroe where the Texas secondary wasn't really tested at all in that game. They're going to be tested in this game, particularly because another recognizable name on this Rice roster is Luke McCaffrey, the brother of, yes, Christian McCaffrey, playing receiver. He was their leading receiver a year ago with 58 catches. Along with Bradley Rosner, they're an experienced group at the receiver position, and they give JT Daniels some weapons to throw to. They do return 4 of 5 starters on the offensive line, and they are experienced up there. The concern is size. Texas has the size and the athleticism advantage at basically every single position. And you would expect that, right? Now, Texas is a 35-point favorite for a reason. They have the talent advantage. They're playing at home. People expect a lot from this Texas team, obviously, as you spoke to. I expect the defense to be really good, and we'll talk more about the defense later in the show when I think we have a buy or sell question pertaining to the defense along with the offense. So we'll talk about that. I think the keys for Texas, you just want to execute. You want to play clean, solid football, not a whole lot of penalties. Come out, really try to throw that first punch. And I want to see Quinn Ewers hit on some deep balls down the field. Get them in rhythm early with the short to intermediate game, and then take your shots. I want to see A.D. Mitchell get involved. I want to see potentially Isaiah Nayer, if he's healthy enough to get some snaps in this game, get involved downfield. And I want to see Xavier Worthy utilized in the way that he should be utilized in the short to intermediate passing game. What else am I watching for? If you're a Texas fan, you got to be watching the interior of the offensive line. We know what the tackles are. Kelvin Banks could potentially be an All-American this year. He's already one of the better offensive linemen, period, in college football. Christian Jones, 6-year senior, had a really good year last year. People are expecting for a lot from him at the right tackle position. He could be an all-Big 12 caliber player this year. The interior of that offensive line is where Texas really struggled, and it was a pain point last year for Texas. They do make some changes. They still have Hayden Connor at left guard. They still have Jake Majors, who's a little undersized for a center, but a really solid, experienced center. The pain point has been that right guard position. They elevate 2022 5-star recruit DJ Campbell to the right guard spot. Sarkisian announced today in his second press conference of the week that DJ Campbell would start at right guard. That's big news. He's higher upside, potentially, if what he projects to be, which is a solid NFL offensive lineman, as guys that come out of the state of Texas with his recruiting profile typically end up being. That's a big time upgrade for Texas. They need to be able to run the ball in between the tackles. Inside zone scheme was a problem at times last year when they faced better defensive fronts like TCU and some other teams that we saw them play. I want to see how they split the carries between Jonathan Brooks and CJ Baxter. Nobody knows what the depth chart looks like yet. Sark said it would be released before the kickoff on Saturday. I expect Jonathan Brooks to get the first snaps. I expect him to be the starter, But I want to see, is it 60-40 Brooks to Baxter, or is it 50-50? That's really interesting to me. And then defensively, uh, there's one player in particular that I'm watching, along with all the other freshmen who are going to play in this game. As Sark has said, there are going to be freshmen from that 2023 recruiting class who play early and often, with exception, of course, Arch Manning. You're going to see Jonte Cook. You're going to see C.J. Baxter. You're going to see Malik Muhammad at corner. You're going to see Anthony Hill at linebacker. You're going to see Derek Williams, the number 2 overall player in the state of Louisiana, in that 2023 recruiting class behind Arch Manning at the safety position. You're going to see a lot of these freshmen get playing time. You're going to see Leona Lafau at the linebacker position play behind Jalen Ford. I want to see how these guys do, but there's one guy in particular that I need to see, because I think depending on what Texas does with him in this particular game could be a foreshadowing as to how they use him next week in Tuscaloosa. And he's a really important guy to this Texas defense and to the success of this particular recruiting class. That would be Anthony Hill, the 5-star linebacker out of Denton, Texas. Went to Ryan High School, just in the Dallas Metroplex area. Heard a lot of good things out of fall camp out of this guy. We'll see how good his instincts are and how good he plays the run. But he's a thumper. He's downhill. He's probably the most athletic defensive player that Texas has right now. And if fall camp reports mean anything, Texas will be using him to aid in pass rush. I think that's where you could see Anthony Hill's impact early on from a Texas perspective, from a Texas defensive perspective. And that's huge because I've talked about it in the last couple episodes. One of the pain points for this Texas defense, or one of the uncertainties for this Texas defense, is who generates pressure on the outside opposite Barron Sorrell. We expect Sorrell to have a really good all Big 12 caliber type season. Right now they have Ethan Burke, the 2022 recruit out of Westlake High School, the high 4-star recruit playing that position. And he looks good in fall camp, but Texas is probably going to have to find ways at points in times this season, especially against better offensive lines like next week. They're going to see one of the better offensive lines in college football in Alabama. They're going to have to find ways to generate pressure, and Anthony Hill is going to play a big part of that. Whether he's rushing up the middle or coming off the edge, Anthony Hill is the player to watch for me, along with the 2 freshmen on the offensive side of the ball. I do think you're going to see Jonte Cook make a couple explosive plays in this game. And I think C.J. Baxter will score a touchdown. I don't know how it will happen. Maybe he'll be catching a pass out of the backfield. Maybe he will run. But I do think you'll see C.J. Baxter and Jonathan Brooks both score touchdowns for Texas. So that's what I'm watching for. If I had to pick it, I think Texas covers this spread. They should cover this spread. Come out, execute, step on their throats early. But don't overlook Rice. They have talent, and the expectations are, from a Rice program perspective, is that they will be competing in the conference that they're in, and they will be a 6 to 7, maybe 8-win team this year as they bring in an improved quarterback and they have some returning talent and experience on both offense and defense. And Mike Bloomgren is a really good, solid coach, and Rice has improved each year that Mike Bloomgren has been there. They've improved in their win total. Now it's been 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, but it's been gradual improvement, and Rice fans expect that to continue in 2023. So just come out, play your game, and get tuned up for what's going to be one of the games of the season next week in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, I mean, what else is there to really say after that? But one thing I did want to point out is I want to see them do 2 things really well. And after this, I'm just going to ask you something just to see what your take on it is. But for me, I want to see them dominate in the trenches, which you touched on, obviously. And then 2, I want to see them win the 4th quarter. It doesn't matter who is in the game at that point. You're probably going to have some freshmen in the game, like just to rest your starters a little bit, but it doesn't matter. It's about getting into the mindset of finishing. I think that's going to be really big to have that mojo being like, okay, we stepped on their throat going into Tuscaloosa next week. And I think that's going to be essential. That's something we haven't seen from Sarkisian and this in this tenure since he's been here at Texas. And one thing I wanted to ask you is the biggest advantage for Texas in this game is obviously in the trenches with their size, as you said, but you want to get Quinn Ewers going as well. So, from in your opinion, how do you think Sark is going to balance, just running it down their throat and also trying to get Quinn Ewers into a rhythm?
I think you're going to see them come out and throw the ball early and often. But I think as opposed to maybe running to open up the pass like they had to do lots of times last year since they had Bijan and Roschon and there was a lack of depth at the receiver position. They ran the ball a whole lot with Bijan and Roschon to open up the pass, to take attention away from one Xavier Worthy, to take attention away from Jatavion Sanders, who I think is going to have a huge weekend, to take attention away from whoever else was playing receiver, whether that was Casey Kane, Jordan Whittington, played a big role last year. I think instead you're going to see a lot of 3-4 wide receiver sets. You're going to see Quinn in the shotgun, maybe one running back. You're going to see those running backs split out. You're going to see Keelan Robinson early and often. You're going to see the short to intermediate passing game. And once Quinn gets in a rhythm, that's when they'll start to implement the run. I think that's going to be a theme this year for Texas is since they don't have the game breaker difference maker at the running back position, and there is still some uncertainty on the interior of that offensive line, a lot of the time they're going to throw early and often. Get Quinn Ewers' confidence going. Once he gets the confidence, his talent takes over, right? But the problem at times last year was confidence, and I absolutely agree with you. The fourth quarter, especially if you listen to my show on Tuesday, I talked about the stats the past 2 years in the Sarkisian area being outscored in the fourth quarter when most of the time Texas has actually been like a top 10 team in terms of the statistics in the first 3 quarters of games. Carry that mindset over, whatever it might be, from the first 3 quarters to the fourth quarter. But one thing I think that's going to help Texas is they got depth this year. And so I think you're going to see them rotate guys in and out more and more often early in games so that they can conserve some of the key guys' energies going into the fourth quarter. So that's absolutely a key for Texas is carry that mindset that you have early in games into the fourth quarter. And then I'll talk about this more next week because it really applies more to next week when the level of competition really jumps up. But Sark is really good on script. Texas is really good early in games offensively. And this really doesn't apply to this week because I still think they'll just out-talent Rice. And It's nothing against Rice. But when you're playing those tougher defenses, once it gets to the middle of the second quarter, the middle of the game, I want to see Sark make more adjustments on the fly. Because sometimes, at points in times throughout his Texas tenure so far, for whatever reasons, the Texas offense has those mid-game slumbers where they don't look the same as they do early in games when they're on script. And Sark has those plays lined up. He's fantastic when he's got the plays lined up. He has not been as good when he doesn't and has to just adjust on the fly. That's a big part for Sark this year. And hopefully Paul Chryst, who's the offensive analyst that they brought in from Wisconsin, will sort of help him in that area. I think Paul Chryst is a really key factor for Texas, just like Gary Patterson was on the defensive side of the ball last year for Texas. I think it's the same type deal, but on offense. So we really need to move on. Do you think Texas covers, though?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. We got 2 more games to get through real fast before we get to buy or sell. This one taking place in Charlotte on a neutral field. no home or away here. North Carolina and South Carolina. These teams don't match up all that often, but they match up here. This will be where game day is on Saturday in Charlotte for this neutral site game. An ACC team against an SEC team. You're going to get to see Drake May and Spencer Rattler on a national stage. Drake May, the projected 2024 top 5 pick, right behind Caleb Williams. And then Spencer Rattler, who had a really good finish to last year for a South Carolina team that really finished last year with a lot of momentum as they, I think, drowned Tennessee in one of their last games of the season. That Tennessee team, that really did that Tennessee team in at the end of the year, was that loss to South Carolina where they got trenched in Columbia. So what are you looking for in this game? I mean, the quarterbacks are going to get a lot of the fanfare and a lot of the attention, but is there anything else that you're looking for? Personally, I want to see if North Carolina's defense is any better, but what say you?
Well, obviously the quarterbacks are the biggest thing in this game, but can South Carolina take care of the football? Late last year and just all throughout the year in general, they couldn't take care of the football. That really put a hindrance on what they were able to do offensively because they would move the ball up and down the field and then just give it away when they were in scoring position. And then North Carolina's sake, it's all about whether that defense can hold up. I think South Carolina's wide receivers, it's an interesting matchup from that point of view. So from this game standpoint, I don't know a whole ton about these two teams outside of their quarterbacks. But I mean, I think it's just going to be a shootout.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me is, if at all, is North Carolina's defense any better? Can they generate more pressure? Can they be more disruptive up front? And can they get stops on critical downs and in the red zone? That was the biggest problem for North Carolina last year. They had to win shootouts, and hey, they were well equipped to do that in most cases. They had one of the best offenses in the ACC and in the country last year. But they lose a couple of key weapons. They still have Drake May back there. One of their best receivers, a transfer, Tez Walker, their top receiver who transferred in, is ineligible as of right now to play in this game because of an eligibility decision regarding, the transfer rules and some NIL stuff. He's ineligible to play. Who steps up at that receiver position for North Carolina? They have some nice weapons. And then, of course, that North Carolina defense is a big question. I want to see South Carolina, and we know SEC teams, I expect South Carolina to be better up front than North Carolina is. And you would think when you're playing a great quarterback like Drake May that South Carolina with Shane Beamer would like to come out and run the football, pound that clock, run that clock, milk that clock, and keep an elite quarterback like Drake May off the field. But I actually want to see, if you're South Carolina, they're expecting you to run. I want to see you establish confidence with Spencer Rattler, and get him in a rhythm with your, talented receivers. Nicholas Harbor, who I really like, 6'5", 230, good size. Antoine Wells, Juice Wells. You have weapons. Running with Juju McDowell, the running back, that's good and all. And you have a pretty good offensive line. It's not perfect, but I want to see South Carolina come out and attack this North Carolina secondary, really test this North Carolina secondary early and often, because if you can get Spencer Rattler in a rhythm, we've seen the amount of talent that he actually has and what that can do for an offense that's been, pretty good under Shane Beamer and has gotten better year to year to year. South Carolina 8-5 a year ago. They were hot to finish the season. They returned 6 starters on offense, 4 on defense. But it's really, I think this game really comes down to that South Carolina offense against that North Carolina defense. North Carolina can make some key stops, maybe force a couple turnovers. You mentioned South Carolina's turnover issues the past couple of years. I expect North Carolina to win this game. They're favored for a reason. They have a really good offense and a Heisman caliber quarterback that's probably going to be a top 5 pick next year. But I do think South Carolina is better up front on both sides. I like their defense a little better. And I think if they come out with the right recipe and they're focused, I think South Carolina could absolutely win this game. South Carolina is 1-0 in the Mac Brown era at UNC. They beat them in the Mayo Bowl a couple of years ago. I'm really struggling with the pick here. It just feels like, as you mentioned, it's going to be a pretty high-scoring game. But I'm going to go North Carolina.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm going to take South Carolina to cover the spread, but I think North Carolina will win in a close one.
Okay. That's fair.
Okay.
All right.
Next one.
Last game, and this is the best game of week 1. This is the game everyone wants to watch. Takes place Sunday night, number 5, LSU, a rematch of last year's week 1 game. In Orlando, it's a neutral site, but it's in Florida, playing number 8 ranked Florida State, who has a lot of hype and anticipation coming into the season. It's LSU minus 2.5. We're going to talk about Jaden Daniels a little later in our buy or sell segment. What are you looking for here? There's a lot to talk about here.
Well, I mean, we all know how that game was last year. It was a hot mess. Florida State pulled it out just by the skin of their teeth, and I think in most other scenarios they lose that game. It's just that was a game where it felt like nobody wanted to win, and these two teams are just so much better now than they were then. It's just a entirely different matchup. I still think LSU has the edge in terms of talent, and I still think LSU has the edge in terms of being more battle tested, playing in the SC West last year, playing in the SC Championship last year, playing in multiple tight, close games in big moments. And Florida State, late last year when they caught fire, had that winning streak, they were blowing teams out. And, that's great. But I think that experience in close games is going to pay dividends for LSU here. And I think it's still going to be close. I think it's going to be close right at the end of the game. I think it's going to be a entertaining game throughout. But I just think LSU is going to make the big play here or there in the fourth quarter to get the edge.
Yeah, this certainly will be a close game. For both teams, you just want to see better execution early on. It's a great quarterback matchup, much like Drake May against Spencer Rattler in the North Carolina game. This is also a great quarterback matchup. Jaden Daniels, of course, for LSU. And then Jordan Travis, who's one of the better dual threat quarterbacks in college. And has improved year to year to year. And it's one of the big reasons that Florida State is expected to be a contender this year, is because they return one of the better quarterbacks in the country. I would rank Jordan Travis in my top 8 of college quarterbacks right now. And he's actually, everyone wants to talk about Quinn Ewers, and rightfully so. But in terms of playing in big games, accuracy on a consistent basis, and production on the football field, Jordan Travis is actually a more proven quarterback at the college football level than Quinn Ewers is. And so I really like this Florida State team. Mike Norvell has a lot of momentum, both on the recruiting trail and in the transfer portal. Both teams have, if you're really into the draft and you watch college football just to see the players and, who are the NFL prospects that could potentially, we could be talking about a lot next year when it comes to the draft. There are a couple in this game. Harold Perkins for LSU, really big year last year. And then Jared Verse, the defensive end for Florida State. Watch those guys. how does each offensive line fare in protection versus either front? Both teams are good up front. I'd probably give the edge to LSU slightly, just because they've been recruiting at a higher level and they have more depth. But Jared Verse, man, he's really, really good. He's a projected top 10 pick. And I do think this Florida State defense, the one area I'd probably give the edge when we compare rosters, Florida State and LSU, is the secondary. This Florida State secondary returns a lot. And LSU kind of had to rework their secondary, bringing in a lot of transfers. That doesn't mean it's not talented, but I want to see how this LSU secondary gels together early on. Are there any communication issues on the back end of that defense? Because Florida State has the athletes to burn you. They bring in Keon Coleman, who was one of the better receivers in the Big Ten last year, from Michigan State, averaged 13 yards per reception. They return Trey Benson at the running back position. He can also catch balls out of the backfield. And then they have Johnny Wilson Jr., who's an absolute freak athletically. 6'7", 240, speed like lightning, 13 starts last year, almost 900 receiving yards, and averaged 21 yards per reception. I'm telling you right now, don't sleep on this Florida State offense. If they get proper protection against this LSU front, I think they can do some things to move the ball against this LSU secondary, who aren't world beaters. But with all that being said, Florida State got some breaks last year. I think there's more room for error when you look at these schedules for Florida State moving forward than there is for LSU, just because of that SEC schedule. I think there's a better chance Florida State could run the table the rest of their schedule than I think LSU could. Although I think both teams are going to be in the mix for winning their conferences and getting into the college football playoff, I think LSU will get it done this time. Brian Kelly has been harping on all season long what happened last year, and I think LSU will get this done by probably around a field goal. I think it's going to be another close game, classic early season non-conference game like we've had the past couple of years, and LSU will get this one done. But don't sleep on Florida State.
Yeah, definitely two teams that, if the stars align, could see each other again, possibly. I'm not ruling that out. Even though I'm lower on Florida State than most people, there's no questioning the talent on that team.
Absolutely. So those are our game breakdowns and our predictions for week one. I'll have more game predictions and breakdowns next week. This will be a weekly thing on Thursday. We'll talk about the Texas game in depth, and I'll pick some other games against the spread, break them down for you guys. Next week is loaded. This week's good, but it's not next week. Next week is loaded, headlined by, of course, Texas and Alabama. So get ready for that. So let's move on. I'm really excited to debut a new, hopefully weekly segment. I'm going to have another guest on next week. Y'all will see who that is a little later on. But really excited to debut this. Is hopefully at least a bi-weekly segment, buy or sell. I've seen this on other podcasts, and we're going to do it this year for college football. And I'm really excited to talk about it with Emmy Nixon, as we both came up with some of these. We're going to start Texas-centric. Since this is a Texas-focused podcast, we're going to start with our Texas buy or sell questions. The first one being buy or sell. Texas will finish 2023 with 3 or more All-Americans. Now, before you answer it, just remember there are 3 All-American teams. There's first-team All-American, second-team All-American, and third-team All-American. So there are ample opportunities for this to happen. Do you think it happens, though?
Yeah, I'm going to buy. I mean, you look at Texas' schedule, there's going to be marquee night games where guys are going to be able to make a name for themselves. One being week 2 against Alabama. All throughout the entire season, it's going to be like that. And if Texas is going to get to where we think they're going to get to. Um, we know Kelvin Banks is going to show out. Um, we know what some of these other guys are capable of. JT Sanders, Xavier Worthy. It's not like a set in stone thing, but I could name like 6 or 7, 8 guys that are capable of doing it.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. And look, I think there are 4 easy candidates right off the bat. I definitely think Kelvin Banks, as long as he's healthy, will make it. I think Xavier Worthy's in for a humongous season, a rebound season after some struggles last year and some confidence issues. Battle through an injury the second half of last year with an improved Quinn Ewers, which we do expect. We don't know how improved, but we know he'll be improved. I think Xavier Worthy is in for a humongous season. Those two will definitely be, I think, All-Americans. Then you look at Jalen Ford, who was a third-team All-American last year at the linebacker spot, the star of this Texas defense. Wouldn't be surprised if you just naturally see some negative regression in terms of the amount of turnovers he forces, but I think he's still one of the better linebackers in the conference. I think he's one of the better linebackers in all of America. I think you could see him make it. And then you mentioned JT Sanders. I think he's got to prove that he's the second best tight end in college football, and I think he will. I think those are the 4 names that I can name right off the bat. But we know A.D. Mitchell, if he stays healthy for a whole season and he has all these other weapons around him, get a lot of one-on-one matchups. Texas loves to target him in the red zone, according to fall camp reports. If he has a big year, I could see him maybe sneaking onto this list. I could see, a Ryan Watts or a Jahdae Barron, if they have big years in the secondary, sneaking onto this list. I could even see, if one of these other Texas offensive linemen has huge years, like, the Kelvin Banks year last year, I could see them getting on here. So I think there are candidates. I do think Texas will get at least 3. I don't know how much more than that, but I do think it's reasonable to expect 3. And if they get those 3, then that probably means really good things for this Texas football team. And the biggest one would, of course, be if Quinn Ewers could somehow work his way into being an All-American. But we'll see about that. Let's move on to our next buy or sell question and our final Texas discussion for this episode before we go to a national perspective. This would also mean good things for the Texas football team if they could accomplish this particular feat in 2023. Texas will finish 2023 with a top 10 offense and a top 25 defense. You say?
Oof, that's really tough. That's really, really tough. There's a lot of really good offenses in college football. I feel a little bit more confident about the defensive side. Believe it or not, I think from a passing game standpoint as well, I think you could see a top 10 unit in terms of passing yards, but there's a lot of things that will play into whether or not they're a top 10 offense. Are they going to be efficient in the red zone? Are they going to be great on third down? Are they going to be, consistent, like drive after drive after drive? That's something that's yet to be seen. So I'm gonna be optimistic and say buy, but I think the more realistic option is probably sell.
I'm actually going to sell this one. But I am going to predict that Texas has a top 15 offense and a top 35 defense. I think I would definitely buy that. Maybe even a top 15 offense and a top 30 defense. I don't know about top 10 offense and top 25 defense, but that doesn't mean that, I actually got on here for about an hour last Tuesday and absolutely raved about how good I think this Texas defense can and will be after the improvements that they made last season under Pete Kwiatkowski. And I think that as long as Quinn Ewers is consistent, everything else will take care of itself offensively. They have the weapons and the ammo and the play calling acumen to get things done on the offensive side. 10 returning starters on that side of the ball, and they bring in, a really talented transfer, one of the top players in the portal in A.D. Mitchell. They really get 2 transfer additions when you consider that they got Isaiah Nair in the portal last year, but he didn't even play last year due to his injury. So he's really like another portal addition in theory, since he didn't play last year. So I think both sides of the ball are going to be really good to almost elite. And I think that's going to mean really good things. But I'm going to slightly sell this one as I can't say yet with certainty that both those things are going to happen. But if they do, we're looking at Big 12 championship and potentially college football playoff conversations when we get to November and December. That's what we're looking at with the talent on this Texas football team. Let's go to another place in the Big 12. Buy or sell. And this is just a theoretical statement. You can buy or sell it. I made this up today. Oklahoma made the wrong hire. You are not sold on Brent Venables, and you think the Brent Venables experiment will not end up panning out. Buy or sell.
I'm going to sell. I think with going from Lincoln Riley to a defensive-minded head coach, it's not just a coaching shift. It's a complete mindset, player type shift. I think for this to work, you're just going to have to be patient and wait for Venables to get his guys into the building. And we know Oklahoma has the facilities and the NIL money to dish out to be able to do that. So I think we'll know for sure this year. I think we'll answer some of those questions, whether or not he is the guy. But I feel pretty good about the type of coach Brent Venables is. What he showed at Clemson to me is a guy who's aggressive and is willing to set the tone of what's being done offensively from the defensive side of the ball, which is extremely difficult to do as a defensive coordinator.
A couple weeks ago, I would have sold. Or no, I would have bought this. But now I think I'm going to buy. But I'm going to cautiously buy.
Yeah.
The natural instinct for Texas fans and for fans in general is to make comparisons between Texas and Oklahoma. And rightfully so, right? I mean, these are 2 rival programs, and they're tied together at the hip forever because they're both leaving the Big 12 after this season to go to the SEC. They will be the 2 new members of the SEC conference next year. And we know we know what Red River means to both programs. 6-7 last year. They did get to a bowl game. It wasn't a total disaster. Their quarterback, Dylan Gabriel Jr., who's really talented, was hurt for a lot of last season, and they did not have the personnel as they had like the transfer portal massacre happen when Lincoln Riley decided to leave for USC. They had a lot of that talent leave, rightfully so, because their head coach left. And so the job Brent Venables has to do and has to overcome is he's got to replenish the talent and the depth on this team. We saw it with Texas when they hired Sarkisian. They didn't have quite the transfer portal exodus that Oklahoma had, but Sarkisian has had to weed out some of the Herman guys, some of the bad juju from those Tom Herman teams, weed out some of the guys who did not want to be there, who did not fit the culture, who did not fit his vision and the way he wanted to build a roster. And now I think Texas, a couple years in, is finally going to reap the benefits of that. They have depth. They've recruited at a very high level. And when we compare the 2 teams right now, Texas definitely is going to have the advantage basically everywhere going into the SEC next year. But if you're Oklahoma, after years of success, and I know this is going to be hard, you just have to have patience for a couple years. Brent Venables is one of the better defensive minds in college football. He'll get that defense fixed to a level where you can compete at a very high level in the SEC. They've gotten some big commitments on the defensive line already for 2024. I think you're going to start seeing that momentum build in recruiting. Oklahoma, they always find ways to get good quarterback talent on campus. Good offensive players want to go play with good quarterbacks. I think they'll continue to get good offensive players. I still think they're going to be steps behind Texas for years to come. I don't know what that holds for them in the SEC, but I do think Brent Venables will end up being a successful coach at Oklahoma as recruiting starts to, as he starts to build some momentum and hit his own guys in and build his vision with this Oklahoma team. Last year against Texas, which is the game everyone remembers, Oklahoma they did not have the necessary personnel to compete in that game. Not only was their quarterback hurt, but defensively, they were just torn to shreds. I mean, they had no idea what was going on out there. It's going to be better this year. And the good thing for Oklahoma this year is that look at their schedule. Aside from playing Texas and TCU at the end of the season, they don't have to play Texas Tech, who's getting a lot of hype coming into the season. They don't have to play Kansas State. They don't have to play a lot of the projected top teams in the Big 12. Their schedule is light when you compare it to what Texas has to face coming into this year. I think that could play well for Oklahoma. I think they have a chance to get out to a really good start. Arkansas State, SMU, Tulsa, Cincinnati, Iowa State. Going into the Texas game, I think you could see both schools at potentially 4-1, 5-0, just because of how Oklahoma's schedule sets up and what we expect from Texas coming into the season. So, I do think Brent Venables, whether or not he has the success Lincoln Riley did on a year-to-year basis, that's a different story. But he will have success and he will work out at Oklahoma as of right now. Let's move on. The Pac-12 is getting a lot of hype this year. It's the last year officially. I don't know why the lower third isn't coming up. There we go. Last year, the Pac-12, before it officially dies after this year, This is their last chance to get a team into the college football playoff in the last year of the conference. So a team from the Pac-12 has not made the college football playoff since 2016. Will that happen this year? Buy or sell?
I'm going to sell this. I think there's college football playoff caliber teams in the Pac-12, but the Pac-12 feels like to me, it's pretty much the AFC conference, except you pluck out this year's Chiefs and you place in the 2018 Chiefs with that terrible defense from back then. If you remember, that Chiefs team with Patrick Mahomes in his first year as a starter was the best offense, just tearing teams up, but that defense was horrible. And that's kind of what I expect from USC. It's going to be a bloodbath. They're going to beat each other up. So the likelihood of a team coming out of this gauntlet of a schedule with one loss, just I don't know. It's going to be really tough. But if it does happen, then they deserve to be in.
It's possible, and I hope they prove me wrong. I love to see USC in the college football playoff. I would love to see potentially a school like Oregon in the college football playoff. Maybe even a team like Utah, who we saw play some tonight, and hopefully they'll have Cam Rising back soon. We know about Michael Penix Jr. at Washington. We also know about what UCLA has with Chip Kelly coming into this year. They're a sleeper team in the Pac-12, along with Oregon State. Do not sleep on Oregon State with DJU and the talent that they have up front in that defense. It's a tough place to play. Do not sleep on Oregon State. I'm not saying they're a college football playoff contender, but within the conference itself, they could muck some things up. So I think it's a deep conference, as deep as it's been in the past couple years. I think there is potential for a team to come out and make the college football playoff, certainly. But a lot of their schedules are backloaded. They're going to play each other. And I just don't know if there's one team that can elevate itself above the rest because they all have questions. USC, it's their defense as a whole. Are they going to tackle people? Are they going to get off the field on third downs? And there are questions all over the place. But it's the quarterback conference, and it's going to be a fun conference to watch. And there are a lot of really good top 20, top 25 caliber teams in this conference with good coaches. So I'm hoping that we get to see it in the last year, the Pac-12. But if I have to put my money down based on the way things set up, just like you, I'm going to sell this. We're on to our next topic.
Real fast, I just want to touch on USC. Just we ran into the same conversation last year. Like, is this defense going to get better? This defense has got to get better throughout the season, right? and then it didn't happen. So at some point, Lincoln Riley being the head coach of a team with a terrible defense, like at some point you gotta start asking questions. But
yeah, you got to ask questions. And Alex Grinch, man, if this defense does not get better, he's the guy who was the defensive coordinator with Lincoln at Oklahoma. You all remember that. Came over to USC, and last year they get a little bit of a pass. They just did not have the personnel. This year, they bring in all those transfers, Bear Alexander being the biggest one from Georgia up front. And last week, San Jose State, which is a pretty good, mid-major team, 7 yards per carry in the first half. Like, that's not going to cut it. When you go up against Utah, when you go up against Washington, when you go up against teams in your conference, when you go up against Notre Dame middle of the season, a team that has a great offensive line and loves to pound the football, that's not going to cut it. So we'll see. I think the man under fire has to be Alex Grinch this year if you're USC. I don't think a Pac-12 team will make the playoff, but I'd love for them to prove me wrong on that. We move to the SEC. This is an interesting one for Texas fans. Buy or sell, and I'm trying to be somewhat positive and respectful to my rivals. Even though it's tough, I try to be objective here on this podcast. So I made this question. Buy or sell? Don't be so quick to discount Texas A&M. Their new offensive coordinator, Bobby Petrino, will transform their offense, and A&M can possibly win 9 or 10 games this season. Buy or sell?
I'm going to sell this. I got to see it to believe it, man. Since Johnny Manziel has left College Station, their SC record is horrible. It's like well below 500. So, and obviously they've been through a lot of ups and downs since then, coaching changes, all of that. But when you have the recruiting prowess that Texas A&M has gotten to, and they've gotten to that point where they're recruiting well year over year over year, some of these like 7-6-5 win seasons they just don't cut it. So eventually something's got to give, but I'm not going to say this year. I got to see it to believe it.
This might surprise some people. I'm actually going to buy. I'm not saying Texas A&M will win 9 or 10 games, but can they win 9 or 10 games with the talent that they have? I think they can. I think the Bobby Petrino, Jimbo Fisher experiment is going to work out better than people think it's going to. I don't really know why. I just have a feeling. It can't get any worse than it did last year. Based on what I'm hearing out of fall camp, Connor Weigman, their starting quarterback, really talented sophomore. Hearing a lot of really good things about him. A&M, they've recruited at a very high level for the past couple of years, just like Texas has, and they're right behind Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State in the number of super blue chip recruits that they have on their roster. Yes, they have the fourth most high 4-star and 5-star recruits on their roster in the entire country, just ahead of the Longhorns, who are catching up slowly as they continue to recruit well. I love Evan Stort, the 5-star receiver. I like, despite losing Devin Achane, I like what they have in their backfield. I like Anais Smith Jr. They have a ton of talent, especially up front on this defense. I think they're going to be better, with the exception of when they play Alabama and maybe LSU up front, than most of the teams that they play. And look, I think it's got to happen eventually. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I do think there is potential for it to happen. I think A&M is going to probably end up winning 8 games, but could they win 9 or 10 games if things, best case scenario? Absolutely. You look at their schedule, they get a little bit of a test early going at Miami week 2. I think they'll win that game. Mario Cristobal still really building things and trying to figure things out down at Miami. I don't think they have the talent to keep up with A&M, especially up front. And they get some tough games at home. Now they have to go to LSU, last game of the season right after Thanksgiving. But what happened last year? People thought LSU was going to roll A&M at the end of the season, and actually the opposite happened. And look, LSU is going to be better. Tennessee's probably still going to be really good with Joe Milton and some of the talent they have. They run the hyper speed offense with Josh Heupel. We know Alabama, they have quarterback questions, but they have one of the better rosters in college football. But you get Arkansas at home. You get Auburn at home. You get Alabama at home. You get South Carolina at home. You have to go on the road to LSU, but that's your toughest road game by far that A&M has on this schedule. Only 4 road games all season long, with a neutral site game in Arlington against Arkansas. I think I could see a scenario where this does happen, but am I going to bet it to happen? Probably not. So with all that being said, speaking of LSU, there's a lot of turnover at the quarterback position in the SEC, as we know. Georgia changed quarterbacks. Alabama trying to figure out their quarterback situation in a hurry before they face Texas next week. There's some other turnover in the SEC at the quarterback position. The best I can think of coming back, aside from Jalen Daniels, would probably be like a Spencer Rattler type-ish out South Carolina.
Maybe Jackson Dart,
Maybe Jackson Dart. But LSU, Jaden Daniels, is he the best quarterback in the SEC? Buy or sell?
Buy. I'm pounding the table for this one. I think Jaden Daniels is going to take another step forward this year. Whether LSU, gets into the playoff or is in the playoff hunt late in the season or not, I don't think it's going to be on him whether they are or not. There's obviously a lot of tight games in the SEC, and the ball may not bounce your way, but Jaden Daniels, he's one of my favorite quarterbacks to watch in college football, one of my favorite players to watch in college football in general. So I just think with his dynamic ability to just make plays out of nothing, I mean, that's not something we've seen at LSU since Joe Burrow. And he's not Joe Burrow. I'm not saying he's Joe Burrow, but that kind of dynamic play has shown to be successful at LSU in years past. That's for sure.
I'm buying this as well, and I'll stand on the table with you. Look at this. Look at what LSU returns at the receiver position with Malik Neighbors, who I think can be up there in like the conversation, along with Marvin Harrison Jr. and some other receivers out there, as one of the best in the country at what he does. Over 1,000 yards last year. I expect him to have a huge year. He's surrounded by Kyron Lacey, who I also think is going to have a really big year, finished last year with 11.2 yards per reception. And then Mason Taylor, the sophomore tight end, is really talented as well. We know they're pretty good up front. We know what Jaden Daniels presents from a running perspective as well. Scored 11 touchdowns on the ground last year. I think Jaden Daniels, there's a lot of talent at the quarterback position, in the SEC. I mean, Alabama's still trying to figure out that situation, but that's not to say those guys aren't talented. Ty Simpson, 5-star guy coming out of high school. The other guy that they have competing, Milton. No, not Milton. Gosh, why am I blanking on his name? That's going to kill me. But
I can't think of it either.
Carson Beck at Georgia, really talented guy. There are some other really talented quarterbacks. Spencer Sanders transfers to Ole Miss, really talented guy at Oklahoma State the past couple of years. We know what Lane Kiffin does with his quarterbacks. Typically work out pretty well. But, yes, I do think Jaden Daniels is probably the most talented quarterback and the most proven quarterback right now in the SEC with the most talent around him. So I still have some questions about those Bama receivers. So we'll see what happens. But, yes, I do think Jaden Daniels will be in the Heisman conversation at the end of the season. Let's speed through these last couple as we wrap up the show. This is one that you wanted to talk about. Penn State is an interesting team coming into this year. Penn State will break through by beating Ohio State and or Michigan. Buy or sell?
Well, I'm going to buy this. It's going to, take a lot to get it done, and it's hard to get over that hump, but they get Michigan at home this year. They're going to have to go, obviously, into Ohio State, which is an extremely tough place to play. But I think they have the talent to match up with these teams now, especially adding in, can't think of his first. I think it's Allar.
Yep.
Drew Allar, I believe.
Yep.
Super strong arm guy. I mean, the quarterback position has been what's held back this Penn State team. All other parts of their roster, you could argue, are on par, if not better than anyone else in the Big Ten, really. I mean, they're right there. So if they can get quality quarterback play from Drew Allar and that defense continues to be dominant, they're going to be in any football game, any game they play. They're not going to be out of it at any point.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they will break through. They get Michigan, as you mentioned, November 11th in Happy Valley. I think there's some implied pressure on James Franklin this year to have a big season. He returns a lot of experience and talent to this roster that was already experienced from a year ago and went 11-2 last year. 7-2 in conference, but they finished third in the East because then again, they've struggled to beat Michigan and Ohio State for whatever reasons. 8 offensive returning starters, 8 defensive returning starters. Everyone wants to talk about Travion Henderson at Ohio State. Everyone wants to talk about Blake Corum at Michigan. Nobody is talking about Nicholas Singleton, the running back for Penn State. Watch out for him. I think he's going to have a really big year behind a good offensive line. And you look at what they brought in, Dante Cephas, the transfer, along with Keandre Lambert-Smith Jr., who could be a potential sleeper All-American candidate. Theo Johnson, the talented tight end, and this defense that has a lot of returning experience with guys like, Riley Thompson and Jalen Reed in that secondary. Kalen King could potentially be a first-round pick next year. Yes, I think Penn State will win one of those games. The question is there potential to trip up elsewhere? That's where I'm potentially worried with it. Young, youngish quarterback like Drew Allar. We're going to talk about the SEC West here in a minute. We have a question as it pertains to the SEC West, but going at Illinois, I expect Illinois to be a good football team this year. Iowa at home could potentially be tough. And there are some other games in there that I think could potentially be landmines if this Penn State team does not come in focus. But yes, I do think they'll end up beating most likely Michigan at home, because that'll likely be a whiteout game in November, and it's going to be cold. That's going to be one of those classics this college football season. So with that, ask a quick question about Ohio State. We don't need to spend much time on this. Marvin Harrison Jr., is he a legitimate Heisman contender? Buy or sell?
I'm going to buy. I think Marvin Harrison Jr., with his combination of size and quickness, is a generational wide receiver prospect. And just the mental ability of just being so advanced for his stage in his career, because of obviously being the son of a route technician like Marvin Harrison. But on top of all that, you look at this Ohio State schedule, they've got a lot of marquee football games. At Notre Dame, September 23rd. Obviously versus Penn State, like we just talked about. At Wisconsin. Michigan State, who may or may not. Actually, no, never mind on that one. And then obviously Michigan, November 25th as well. So the route is there. No pun intended. For Marvin Harrison to get himself into the conversation. And obviously betting isn't legal in Texas, but if I were to place a bet, I would say Marvin Harrison Jr. will be in New York as a finalist for the Heisman Trophy this year.
I wouldn't disagree with you. I would buy this as well. Would I place money on a receiver to win the Heisman? I'm not sure. I'm not saying it can't happen. It happened a couple of years ago with Devontae Smith.
Finalist, yeah.
But the saturation at the quarterback position, I'm just afraid that if there's a really good team that's in the college football playoff that has, one of those marquee quarterbacks, that they'll end up getting the nod. But this question does not say Marvin Harrison Jr. will win the Heisman in 2023. It says he'll be a legitimate Heisman Trophy contender. And yes, I think he absolutely will. You're not going to be able to double team him very often. They got two other receivers who could be first-round picks in their own rights, in Emeka Egbuka and Julian Fleming. Julian Fleming, maybe not so much, but definitely Egbuka, I think, has that type of talent. Julian Fleming more so probably a day two type guy, but they're all really talented. And then Cade Stover at the tight end position. It just all depends on Kyle McCord, who's their quarterback, their new starting quarterback. Whether or not there will be a precipitous drop-off between McCord and the quarterbacks they've had there the past couple of years, and Justin Fields and C.J. Stroud, we'll have to see. But I think, with what Ryan Day schemes up and how this Ohio State offense works with their offensive line and their running game, there's no reason that Kyle McCord wouldn't be able to have a lot of success in getting the ball to these receivers accurate and on time to allow them to have the production that we think they're going to have. I think Marvin Harrison could be a 1,600-yard type receiver this year. That's the levels I think he could potentially reach, along with, between 15 and 20 touchdowns. Those are the numbers I think he could have. And if he puts up those type of numbers, he will be in New York. Does he win it? I don't know. But yes, he will be there. I agree with you there. Last question as we wrap it up here in about an hour, 15, hour, 20-ish minutes or so, which is what I was planning on. Some of these shows are going to be longer, and that's okay. Iowa. the SEC West is more interesting than I think people are giving it credit for this year, and that's what I think makes college football interesting this year. Is there are a lot of teams that have that potential, but people aren't talking about them. Iowa, are they the college football playoff contenders that nobody is talking about with Cade McNamara, the former Michigan quarterback who transferred in? Or is Iowa a college football playoff contender in your eyes?
Oh man, it's tough because the route in the Big Ten West is a lot more, um, I guess, murky than in other spots of the country because most teams can say, okay, we're gonna if we have one loss, we can still get in. But in the Big Ten West, it kind of feels like you gotta be undefeated going into the Big Ten championship game and then win that game. But with all that being said, this Iowa team can do that. There's no question about it. This defense, year after year after year, is dominant, and the offense now has this storyline surrounding it with the 25 point per game benchmark that they're trying to hit. Forget all that for a second. I mean, this team, they really only need to put up like 20 points to win games. That's the formula they've had for years. And with this defense, you could match them up with any offense in the country, and I would feel confident in them holding any offense under 35 points. And that's saying a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't I don't know for sure that Iowa is the college football playoff contender that nobody's
Yeah.
talking about. I mean, I think they're a really good football team. Uh, the problem is, I think there are, if not Iowa, I think there are other teams that have that potential to be the potential like surprise team out of nowhere, college football playoff type contender people are talking about. Maybe a team has a year out of the SEC West, like maybe a TCU did last year. And TCU got in with a loss in the conference championship game. I think if you are a team in the Big Ten West, yes, you probably got to run the table in the regular season. But if you are a, a one-loss team after the conference championship game, and that one loss is to potentially Ohio State or Michigan or maybe even a Penn State, and there's chaos elsewhere, like in the ACC and the Big 12, yeah, I mean, you could be in that conversation. Absolutely. I think it's a matter of who's it going to be. It could be Iowa for sure. I I I kind of need to see it to believe it, sort of like
Right.
you
Yeah.
do with A&M, just because that
That's
offense
fair.
has been so dismal the past couple
Yeah.
of years. Now getting Cade McNamara absolutely helps. They have not had a quarterback like Cade McNamara at Iowa in a while. And what they did in the transfer portal was impressive. But I really like Wisconsin as well. They bring in Luke Fickell, a coach who's already taken a team with not the talent of Ohio State, Bama, all these elite teams to the playoff before. He's done it before at Cincinnati, and he gets 18 returning starters with Braylon Allen, who I think is a sleeper at the running back position to potentially be in Heisman conversations if he has a big year and Wisconsin has a big year. And with the SMU transfer, Tanner Mordecai, who's really, really talented at the quarterback position, I think if anybody, no disrespect to Iowa, the sleeper maybe out of the Big Ten West might be Wisconsin.
Yeah. Absolutely. I can see that. Um, it'll be interesting to see them play Big Ten or not. It'll be interesting to see them play Ohio State early on in their season. Maybe answer a few questions about their team early on if they can keep that game close. But yeah, I mean, out of the Big Ten West, those are the two teams, I think.
And don't sleep on
Um,
Illinois either.
and
I don't think Illinois is a college football playoff team, but they have talent Not a lot of people are talking about
Yeah,
with what they
their
brought
defense
in,
is good enough to hang with
with what they
any.
brought in at quarterback, and then what they have on defense. They're not quite to the level of Iowa on defense, but they're a really good, solid football team up front. They have some draft picks, guys that I think are NFL players on that defensive front. And they have, just like Iowa, one of their more talented quarterbacks in the past couple of years. So I think Illinois could potentially be a sleeper team, not to make the college football playoff, but maybe to get to the Big Ten championship game like Purdue did last year. Um, I think Iowa could do it. I think Wisconsin could do it. And then there are teams like Minnesota, Nebraska, Northwestern, and Purdue who all have questions, major questions that I think are going to be in a year of transition and or rebuild. So I think the SEC West is a lot more intriguing than it has been in the past couple years, and that's exciting because we could see, like, say, a 10-2 Wisconsin team face an 11-1 Michigan or an undefeated Michigan team in Indianapolis at the end of the season. We could see, like, Iowa play Ohio State, the big time offense against the big time defense. There are a lot of interesting matchups that could end up happening there. I'm excited for what things hold in the Big Ten this year. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, not only to the Raw Prospect podcast and all the content that we're doing on our main feed, but to this channel. Thank you to the one person who was in and out tonight in the live stream. No questions tonight, unfortunately, but hope you guys enjoyed this. This was our college football preview and week 1 preview. Enjoy this weekend, first weekend of college football. Remember, I plan to be back next week, hopefully 3 times. We got a ton to talk about next week with the Alabama game and everything else that's going on in college football. We'll recap maybe some of the stuff that happened in week 1 as well, what happens in the Texas game and so forth. Emmy, any parting shots, and tell them about Live Take.
Yeah, it was big news today. I got brought on as a brand ambassador for them. So basically, Live Take is the app where you go on and you debate people with your sports takes. It's basically you can either post your hot takes just like you would on Twitter, and it's like a cool place to discuss things there. And then you also can challenge people to debates if you don't agree with what their hot take was or whatever the case may be. So go follow me over there. It's Emmy Nixon RPP over there on Live Take, and that's it. Peace out.
Yeah, and
I'll let you sign us off.
before we go, you're likely going to see me on there as well with Emmy a lot of those times. So that should be fun. It'll be another avenue for us to explore. We don't debate each other a whole lot on this podcast,
Yeah,
so maybe you'll get to see a different side of our sports conversation with that. That's definitely exciting. It can act as like a sponsor per se for our channel,
yeah,
an
yeah.
ambassador for our channel. Exciting stuff. Hook 'em horns. We'll see you next week. Hopefully, Texas takes care of business. We are off to the races in the college football season. School is starting, summer's winding down, and college football is back. And as soon as next week, we'll have football Thursday to Monday with the NFL beginning as well. Football's back. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the college football. And we'll see you next week. Peace out. Hook 'em horns.
Hook 'em.